self-reported home energy audit. All right, to begin, some background. I did this audit on my family home, and my residence is a house. It is 3 stories and just shy of 5,000 square feet. There are 3 residents, and we get to my knowledge, almost all of our energy through coal. The average for a 5,000 square foot house is 2,058 kilowatt hours monthly and 2,696 kilowatt hours annually. In the bottom right, you can also see a pie chart showing the residual site energy consumption by end use, in which you can see the average person is using the most of their energy on space heating and cooling and water heating. The rest is a mix of miscellaneous things such as lighting, electronics, kitchen appliances, and other random appliances. The first thing I want to look at are the averages for the 8 items that I chose to audit within my house, these being a lamp, CD player, Xbox, blender, cat fountain, battery recharger, fan, and light bulb. You can see here are the averages that are found online and averaged out, just what the middle of the road for each one of these products would look like watts-wise. From here, I want to go into my data recollection. You can see I'm using a kilowatt meter with my UMN ID in the photo to show kind of proof of my data recollection. And then there's my light bulb, which was an overhead light, but that was the specific light bulb that I measured from. All right, my weekly log, this shows my use of the appliances that were listed and when and for how long I was using them. I did this log fairly simply through timing my use of the appliance on my phone and recording it in my notes app. All of these appliances are exclusively used by myself or running 24 hours, so I didn't have to intermingle with my family and intertwine with my family, kind of figure out their usage. I didn't think that they'd be super receptive to that, so my appliances are personal and it was very simple to figure out. My kilowatt hour log shows how I took the wattage that I found with my kilowatt meter, as well as the time used and the process of my math there, going from watts to watt hours and watt days, and then turning that into kilowatt hours and figuring out my kilowatt hours per month in total. Just a little bit of multiplication. It's a fairly intuitive process if you look from left to right. All right, moving from there, I want to talk about the logging methods, for the first being constant power. Constant power are fairly intuitive. First, I measured the watts used when my appliance was on and off using the kilowatt meter. A good example of this was my lamp. I could see that when I plugged my lamp in, when it was off, it stayed at 0. The watts stayed at 0, and when it was on, it stayed consistent at 43.1. From here, I simply had to multiply the average time logged, as well as the average watts while on and off, to get the weekly wattage that this appliance was using. Variable power was a little more confusing, few extra steps, but not too bad. Variable power basically means that the appliance is not using the same amount of power at all times. So if you think of something that has to do multiple processes and could be possibly pulling more power for a certain thing and using less in another, my Xbox is a good example of this. When I plugged it into the kilowatt meter, the value was changing and not consistent after a few minutes. From here, I reset the timer on the kilowatt meter and reset it from watts to kilowatt hours. I left my Xbox there for 24 hours and was given the value 2.35, which I then divided by 24 to go from kilowatt days to kilowatt hours, and then multiplied by 1,000 to go from kilowatts to watts. Finally, I could then repeat the same process and multiply this value by the hours I used this device per week. For the overhead light, it was very, very simple. I simply took the light bulb and read the watt value that was inscribed on it. For my light bulb, it was 15.5, and then I used this value directly and multiplied it by the hours used per day. For my final analysis, I want to look at the fact that my house is using almost double the average of a Midwestern home, so it's important to keep in mind that my appliance's impact is not as large in comparison to my own home, where it would be slightly larger, if not twice as impactful, looking at the average home in possibly my area or the Midwest as a whole. So my appliances were using 40 kilowatt hours of energy compared to my household's monthly 2,058. From here, I want to look at my audit versus the averages, in which you can see the discrepancy in between what was the average of these appliances versus what I actually read and the math that I did. The major discrepancies you can see are in the lamp and the blender. I can explain these very simply in the fact that I have a small blender, which was fairly easy. And for the lamp, this one was a little trickier, but when I looked into it, the light bulb on the lamp that I was using was read at 43 watts, and that explains why it's so high in comparison to what your average may seem. This also explains the light bulb in the bottom right, which is the average is 60 and mine was 15.5, as it's a newer LED and was read at 15.5 watts. Moving forward, I think the major way that I can cut down on my energy use is by unplugging my Xbox when I'm not using it. I found that I was using 13.56 kilowatt hours per month simply in phantom energy from my Xbox when I was plugged in, and that I could cut my monthly appliance energy use by almost 1/4 if I simply unplugged my Xbox when it wasn't in use. I'm absolutely going to do this moving forward and maybe save myself some money in the future. These are my references and the URLs to the clip art that I used. Thank you.